Welcome, everybody. We are here for Peter Paul's Community Conversation Series. This is our last week of summer programming, and each week has had a theme. This week is academic strength, and so we have a wonderful, wonderful panel who is going to talk to us about academic strength. So each week we've done something different, and hopefully you've been able to join us and come and share with fellowship and partnership with us. And today we have a wonderful panel that is supporting our mission, and that is support the neighbors of the East End and educated students and equip them to serve as positive contributors to their families, community, and society. We have a great hashtag that's educate the child, engage the family, and empower the community. And we do that within our education department and our family engagement department in ways that is very holistic. And we listen to families and really think about what they need, what they want, and how we can support them and bring partners to the table to make that happen. Today, we're here to bridge individuals, organizations, and communities to build connections. And we're going to do that through our conversation, and it's going to be a little designed to move us from awareness to action. A lot of what the work that we do within our Community Action Network moves our action all along the way. And so today, we're going to honor everyone's voice, honor everyone's experiences, and honor to the purity of motive. So these are the agreements that we have today. This is how we're going to approach our conversation. And this is how we're really going to have open and honest dialogue, conversation around any and everything that comes up during this whole conversation. So this week's panelist, Dr. Brianna Nomi, she's an education organizer with Legal Aid Justice Center, and Mr. Derek Bates, an educator with Richmond Public Schools, and Kim Bailey, who is a site coordinator with Peter Paul. I'm going to give them a moment to introduce themselves and tell me what academic strength means to them. If you guys could do that, I'd appreciate it. In no specific order, just pass it off to the next person when you're done. So, Mr. Bates, would you like to start?
No, I would not, because I'm going to yield to the ladies. So I will let either Kim or Dr. Naomi go first.
Okay. Gentlemen, always a gentleman. I guess I'll go. Hello, everyone. I am Kimberly Bailey. I'm the site coordinator for the George Mason Promise Center. I've done that. This is my third year going into that. I've been with Peter Paul for 8 years, and I have I'm entering my 15th year teaching with Richmond Public Schools. All of everything that I've done has been on the East End. My first 13 took 1 year off to work full-time with Peter Paul, and then last year was my first year at the incredible George Mason, now here in Marsh. And academic strength, when I think of academic strength,
You're breaking up a little bit, Ms. Bailey.
I just take it for.
I missed all
Hello?
of that. I missed all of that because you broke up.
Oh, okay. I don't.
Go for a minute.
When I don't. Huh? I'm driving. Okay.
So we have a lag in your video, and so you may have to sit still to give your part.
So I'll wait. I'm gonna throw it to the doc, and I will wait and get into.
Sounds good.
And then I'll sit still.
Hey everybody, my name is Brianna Nomi, and I am the education organizer at Legal Aid Justice Center with our Youth Justice Program. Prior to coming into this position, I was a public school teacher in RPS for 10 years. I taught 4th grade, kindergarten, and then I was a reading specialist at John B. Carey and Elizabeth Red Elementary. So RPS has my heart. I still do a lot of work with teachers in the community. And currently I'm serving as the point person for the Fund Our Schools campaign. It's a statewide campaign bringing together organizations and individuals to fight for full and fair funding of our K-12 public schools across the Commonwealth. And for me, academic strength, I actually really liked seeing the mission of Peter Paul of educate the child, engage the family, and empower the community, because to me, academic strength really brings all of those things together, starting with empowering the community, engaging the family, and having the strength in numbers of people on the same page, fighting for what's best for children. So I'm sure we'll speak more in depth about those things, but for me right now, I think that, you know, really bringing parents, teachers, community members together to support young people's education experiences is what academic strength means to me.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Bates, you ready?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Derek Bates. I am an exceptional education teacher, also known as special education teacher at the illustrious, the amazing George Mason, well, formerly known as George Mason, now Henry L. Marsh III Elementary School, located in Richmond's very own East End, which is the best end. I've been with Richmond for 6 years now. In some capacity, I did my student teaching there, so I just love Richmond. I've been with George Mason for the last 6 years, so I have like a major bias towards the East End babies. Academic strength to me, oh my gosh. Academic strength is just the ability to know that you can learn. I don't want to make it, well, my definition is not just specific to reading, writing, math, and science. It's just the ability to know that academically you can succeed, and that there are going to be individuals around you in your life that you're connected to that's going to help you reach your success. So that's what academic strength is to me. And once again, the East End is the best end.
Okay. So in thinking about all those different ways that we learn, we just found out that we're going into a virtual learning environment. What have educators had to do to adapt to this new environment?
Breathe. Breathe. And
Yes. Okay, so I'm at my destination. I don't know if I need to do anything all over again or if I can just jump into the conversation.
If you would like, you can just jump in.
Okay, so what have we had? What have we had to do, Mr. Bates? We have been challenged to learn a new program, a new English program through professional development. I know for me, mine was this week, but basically, I'm going to speak on both wearing a Peter Paul hat and an RPS hat, because right now my RPS hat is one that I'm wearing more. So outside of doing professional development, just literally, I think each teacher is just really trying to channel their inner creativity to see exactly what they can do and how they can deliver quality instruction to our babies who some of us haven't seen since March. I mean, some teachers have kept up with their, with Zoom meetings and, teaching and just trying to keep the momentum up because our babies have been at home. But now that it's across the board all the way, I do think that a lot of teachers are starting to feel the pressure. At first it was like, oh, okay, all right, we're going to figure it out. But now we have to figure it out because we have students that are waiting for us to get them to build them up. Academic strength, academic strength doesn't look one way. I know that for a fact. It doesn't just look one way, because all of us now, even the kids, like they even need to figure out how am I going to actually take this in. So it's more what the teachers are doing, but I think across the board, families, educators, everybody, Peter Paul, everybody's trying to figure out how can we roll into this the most effective way.
Mr. Do you have anything to add to that?
Just to piggyback off of what Kim said, is also just us realizing that we don't know. Like, we do not know what this is going to look like. Our principal sent out an email, and she said, they didn't teach us in principal school how to be a virtual principal. But she also said, nor did they teach you all in teacher school how to be a virtual teacher. So it's going to be a lot of moments where we just have to allow grace, not just to ourselves, but also to our administration. And it's just being okay, and personally just sitting with the fact that I don't have any control over how I'm going to be able to conduct my classroom next year, especially with it not being face-to-face. The biggest part I'm going to miss is just building those face-to-face interactions and relationships from such. So that's going to be a challenge, like Kim said, becoming creative on how to do it. And I think this is really, I feel and know that this is causing teachers to really dig deep into what can be done to keep academics going, but also foster and continue to nurture our students, especially the babies that we have on the East End, because we know the stories that have historically come along with teaching in this side of town, and how you had to also wear the hat of nurturer as well as teacher. So just finding a way to mesh that together virtually.
So what kind of supports do you need to be successful to do that? What do you need to help with creativity to support your youth and families virtually? How can we help with that?
I'm big on data. Like, as much as I despise the word, it's important. So we need to know what the families really need. Like, there has to be a huge bridge and connection, because now our only form of communication is to actually do it. Because at one point we had parents that could come into the school, cuss and fuss and whatever. And now we don't have those opportunities because we don't have an open school. So we have to figure out what's going on out there and how can we address it through our lessons, through our instruction, through our interactions. That's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to. Just finding out what are the needs of the families in this virtual setting.
And with the needs with the families, being able to move with the needs. Like, if we hear that the families need computers, okay, well, how can Peter Paul help, or how can these outside agencies help to get computers to the families? I don't want to believe that we have families that are just sitting at home and saying, okay, well, the school is giving out laptops. Oh, well, I mean, not even some parents literally cannot get up there. They literally don't have the means of transportation. So how successful can I be if I can't even reach the family, if I can't reach my students? So I think when the laptops and the distribution and all of that starts happening again, that outside agencies, now that we see that outside has opened up some, let's be honest, like in March and April, a lot of people were scared, but now people taking vacations, they're wearing a mask and stuff like that. But I think that there's a way, or there should be a way, to get what the families need. Yeah, to get the materials and the resources that the families need, because it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Internet. I know internet is an issue, so I would like to see how, or in some type of way, how everybody can come together and make sure that not only West End students, but East End students, everybody has internet that works, that's high speed. Those are major things, and I'm probably looking at a long-term goal, because I don't know if that's something that can be done short-term. But if you ask how can we help, at least starting there with trying to come up with a plan as well.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ms. Nomi.
I'm hearing a lot of conversation around infrastructure, and I think that is like a huge thing that we need to do to support our teachers and our families and our students. I think we also need to be granting teachers a degree of autonomy that is not generally granted to them in this moment. Teachers are in communication with their families. Teachers are in communications with their students. They know what they need. So I think particularly in this moment, we need to kind of release that control that we try to put on teachers and put on classrooms, and let teachers have the flexibility and autonomy to do professionally what they know is best. I think we also need to, and what I'm hearing from teachers is really getting beaten down by this narrative of like lazy teachers. In this moment, like teachers just being able to like sit on their computer and like push out these lessons. But I think that teachers, like, you know, Mr. Bates said, are really having to dig deep into their instructional and professional toolkits and do things in creative ways that they've never had to do before. So we need to really get away from that really, you know, demeaning narrative around teachers in order for them to shine and really do their best this year.
And from the three of you, I've heard communication. How can we increase communication between educators and families and youth and educators? And because a lot of what you hear, you would normally hear in the regular classroom environment. You would hear some of the challenges a youth is having, but with this virtual environment, it's going to look completely different. So how can we increase that communication amongst families and educators and youth and our educators?
I think one way is continue to do things of the sort. Reaching, you know, we're taught continuously as educators that we have to reach people where they are. And I want us to get away from that phrase because it can be kind of condescending at a point, but I think we just have to be very sure that we are connecting to people the way that the connection should take place. That's
Mm-hmm.
to say that, you know, if we have an influx of parents who are using Facebook and social media, we need to make ourselves readily available on such platforms. If we also know that, I mean, I know on my adult education side that a lot of adults do not have computer literacy skills. And I think that's something that has to be taken into grave consideration when we are going into this the virtual schooling, that sometimes our babies won't have parents who know how to do drafting emails or know how to log into Google. And that's going to cause a level of frustration. So it has to be, like Naomi said, autonomy on the teacher's part, but also there has to be an understanding that once this gets on the ground and running, it's going to be so many hiccups, like on a regular basis, until it's understood by all parties of what the expectation is. But not just knowing what the expectation is, but having the skills to meet said expectation. So just being aware of how we need to put out information, but also what information needs to be put out. And that's going to open up the lines of communication. Like if you have to send a DM, then so be it. It's not going to be, I can always send an email because it's not going to be responded to or know how to be retrieved, if I'm making sense. Kim is having a hard time with this phone.
He is. I hope you're here now.
I am sorry, y'all. It's just not letting me be great, but
You are always great, Miss Bailey.
fine.
Absolutely.
I'm back. I'm only as grown, okay? We're all trying to figure out ways to make sure that these babies are strong academically. Like how I pulled that in there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we're talking about communication and how can we increase that communication or facilitate better communication between educators and youth and their students. And their families.
Oh, well, I'm old school, so always a phone call, text message, but really, I think probably using more, well, actually, no, because RPS has a pretty good social media platform. So does Peter Paul. So maybe, I don't know. People don't really read the newspaper anymore. I don't know, maybe the news, but communication, exactly what it is, being able to talk. So if we're already channeling text messaging, phone calls, emails, social media, that is a bigger question. What else can be done outside of going to the homes? And some people aren't okay with that.
So
I would love to see. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brianna. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say one thing, that I would love to see more time opened up in the proposed schedules for teachers, to have built-in times for outreach to parents and communication. I think if there were like hour blocks kind of at, several points of the day where it could really be conducive to parents' schedules, whatever they may be, or phone calls or visits or whatever that may be. I just think that there needs to be more built-in time for those communications to take place.
Definitely.
Very much fair. And I think we've got a few community members on the line, and just want to know if they'd like to share any ways that they would like to see communication increased. And if you do have ideas, raise your hand. To raise your hand, it's easier to go through the little two people icon that says participants. If you click on that, there's a raise your hand option once that window opens. Or to make it easier, you can just go to reactions and give me a thumbs up and I'll know you want to say something. I do have one question already, and that is there a plan to have a computer orientation or some kind of orientation for parents to boost their base level of computer literacy?
Is there a plan like from the district?
District.
Okay, well,
Yeah, from the district or from the schools?
Caveat out there. I am representing Derek Bates. I'm not representing Richmond Public Schools. I just so happen to be an employee of Richmond Public Schools. So these thoughts, ideas, conversations, and ideologies are that of Derek Bates. I don't know anything about a computer literacy class for parents, but I'm hoping that's something that's being tossed around as an idea. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
I do know that idea is being tossed around through RPS, understanding that there are different levels of computer literacy. Discussion is being had at this point, but the rollout of it or what it's going to look like has not been finalized at this point, but it's definitely a part of the discussion right now. And if you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat or raise your hand. What'd you say, Miss Bailey?
No, I was I don't even know. I just lost my train of thought. It was something from what you just said.
Just to roll out.
If it comes back to me. Oh, it did. I do think that is important if they can find a way to put that, to get that out there, because there are parents that are nervous about it. At first they weren't, because it was like, okay, we'll figure it out. But now, like, since this is the standard, I do think that sometimes should be allotted. And then I also think when the school year starts, that there should also be at least a week allotted to just teaching children how to manage through Google and through Google Classroom, and being able to become a little bit more familiar with what the teacher expectations are through this virtual setting as well. Be ready for instruction. That's not going to work. We're going to have students that can't log in, that don't know how to log in, that don't have computers, that may not still have internet. So I would like to see RPS grant some time into that schedule. One, yes, for parents and families, but then two, for the students. The students need to know how to use Flipgrid and how to use everything that their teachers are going to create.
Very, very much fair. And I will say that for some of our youngest learners who've never had a structured environment, this is going to be a structure that they're not used to. And so thinking of our youngest learners, what can we do to support that learning? How can we come together to even make sure that that's going to be successful?
We definitely, especially with like our young babies like that, we do not want to exert any part of their being. Like, we can't expect children who've never been inside of a classroom, who maybe only had like a preschool experience, to sit in front of a computer for 5 hours out of the day. Like, that's asinine, and I think that's kind of dangerous to the psyche of a child, just to be in front of a computer all day long. It needs to be more, there needs to be more time for creativity. I think this is an amazing platform to foster creativity in children, like in a Montessori style teaching or learning, just like a learn through play type situation. And I think we need to get away from the constraints of wanting to monitor what children are doing versus just seeing the final product of their creation. Like we still need to instruct babies on how to like learn numbers and letters and things of that sort. But as far as their representation and their like output of information that they've received, that's where the freedom needs to lie. So just making it an easy transition for them, because this is, I mean, as a 35-year-old adult, this transition to virtual has blown my mind. So I can only imagine what a 5-year-old is dealing with and thinking about what I'm going to have to do. So,
or a 3-year-old,
or
or
a 3-year-old, yeah, because pre-K is real school too, and they start at 3 years old. So that's different. That's different.
Yeah. And in thinking about that, you know, the structure that we might need for our youngest learners, think about our special education students. What kind of supports should we have out there, or what's something that we need to know that going into this virtual environment that we might need for our special education students? Understanding they may have a 504, they may have an IEP, they might have a physical disability or a mental disability. The range is so broad, and you know, this virtual environment may pose as a huge challenge for their success. How can we support them or uplift that family voice that needs to go along with that child? I'm gonna start with Bree on this one because she looks like she's ready.
No, I just think, you know, this is a really challenging time. And even just looking at the sample schedules for pre-K through, you know, high school students, I think that like the inner teacher in me is just like, that looks so unrealistic. You know what I mean? And particularly for our students with the greatest needs and who need the greatest supports. I haven't actually seen that much like articulated about how we will be providing support for families. I've spoken with a lot of exceptional education teachers who are very concerned about what that will look like. Heard that the IEP process in terms of revising students' IEPs to make them more appropriate for this learning environment has been very challenging. I'm sure Mr. Bates can speak more to that based on experiences he's had, but I think that we're going to have to really be flexible, and we're going to have to really listen to parents. Like, we might need to revisit this whole thing in 2 weeks after schools start to be like, is this working for you? Is this working for your child? Is this working for the support services that you're supposed to be offered and provided? So I just think constant check-ins are going to be so necessary. Like, we can't just expect this to work through January. We're going to have to revisit it, like, I would say bi-weekly.
Definitely. And it's amazing that you mentioned that I may be able to speak to the needs or like the processes of special education right now. Mm-hmm. And my only speak to that is that please extend grace to your special education teachers, compliance coordinators, as well as just the special education administrators, because this is a very unique time. And the way that education has been structured, just in general, was not to be taught virtually. And I think that's the conversation, or even just the realization that everybody needs to have, like, the way we are about to do this is not the way it was created to be done. And that's also not to say that the way it was created to be done was the correct way, but that's a completely different community conversation. All of that also to bring forward the point that now is the time to stay within policy and regulation, but come up with creative solutions versus like offensive annoyance, meaning like complaints. We understand that this is not idealistic. We also understand that the services as written in the IEP may need to be changed. And we have to keep in mind that we want to keep children and families safe, because I can educate a child with a deficiency. I cannot educate a child that is deceased. So keeping that in mind, like when you have a student that has special education services, that those services are going to be given when the time is appropriate face-to-face, but also know that there are individuals who are sitting around and they're coming up with creative solutions on how to implement IEPs without breaking the law or without endangering a child or a family. And we just have to give that time. And it's not going to happen overnight. There's still questions I have as an educator of children with special needs. How am I going to impactfully teach my children? And I don't know how I'm going to do that yet. I really honestly don't. So just like Naomi said, just understanding that you have to give teachers the grace and time to figure it out that's going to work, and it's going to be for individual students. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. Once you find out what works, it's going to work for that child and that family, and then you'll have to figure out what's going to work for the next child and family, hence individualized. So that's where I am with it.
So in understanding that grace needs to be given, what provisions can be added for SPED students? Like just what concessions can be done virtually?
I'm looking forward to having one-to-one sessions with some of my students. I think that's going to give us the best bang for the buck, and just allowing the schedule to have that happen. And also knowing that, I mean, transparently, a lot of parents have children in special education services and they don't understand the full scope of their rights, like to have a child that receives SPED services. So just reminding parents of the rights, but also reminding parents of what's possible, like logistically through safety precautions. Like it's definitely illegal not to give a child what's in their IEP. And that's point blank period. But we have to figure out how can we provide those services, again, to keep families safe. So the provisions, I'm not sure what provisions could be added. I think that's a great question, and it has to be answered by a person who knows the resources that are available. And the only resource I know is myself. So I'm going to be willing to offer one-to-one services when the time is available by that child and that family. So that's really the only thing I can say I'm going to be able to do.
Thank you. Do you know whether or not that there is a time frame that IEPs and the 504s will be reviewed for RPS so that parents can start having that conversation about what's working, what's not working, and making those changes? And do you know about the fluidity of how those changes will occur?
I'm going to transparently answer that question. I do have a date that was given to me. I'm not sure if that date has been public knowledge yet, so I'm not at liberty to say. But I will say that IEPs are going to be reviewed before October comes around, because we need to know what's going to happen. So as soon as school starts, I do believe it's the full intention to have IEPs reviewed by teams to be sure that we're in compliance, just in legally providing services and providing services that meet needs. So yeah, it's gonna really shape up. And this is not just speaking to Richmond Public Schools, but it's gonna reframe how special education looks in all over the world. So it's gonna be really interesting to see what comes from this.
I think it'll also be interesting to see what type of federal monies are being allocated to divisions in terms of what types of supports they can put in place. I mean, I would love to see us add more personnel to be able to support particularly our students with special needs and other sort of, exceptional learning circumstances. There are students who don't necessarily have an IEP, but will not be successful in a virtual learning environment.
Absolutely.
And so what types of supports can we put in place for them? What is the expectation? How are we revising our practices and policies so as to not, discipline those students because of that? Like I think all of these things need to be revisited and kind of looked at over the coming weeks. But I think that it all ultimately does come down to some funding. And if we don't have the funding to do these things, we're kind of stuck with what we've got, And so I think that part of our advocacy needs to be really looking at our lawmakers, both federally and at the state level, and demanding that those monies be allocated to support students.
Ms. Bailey, did you want to share something?
When it comes to
I'm going to say no, because I feel like you all are speaking about exceptional education. Is that it? And revisit in making sure that, okay. So I'm going to say no, because Mr. Bates is the master of that. But I will piggyback off of Brianna, because yes, there are some students, and I can list. Well, I'm not going to do that, but off the top of my head right now, I know some students who have not been identified to receive special education services, but do need the support or they need the support, but they also need the resources and the way maybe that a SPED teacher could deliver the instruction. Because they aren't identified doesn't mean that they still don't have issues, and we have to be honest, because a virtual setting, I know for my babies, it's probably not going to work. It's probably not going to work, but that's going to be up to everybody on board to figure out how it will work. But no, I'm gonna let the doc and Mr. Bates have that one, because I even though COVID is here, and when I get that, I am an in-person teacher. I feel like I am a whole experience, and I feel like that's not going to be real. I'm going to do my best to relay it through the computer, but it's going to be hard to do that, because my kids, I know when they're having an issue, and it's just, oh my gosh, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to become a rant, so let me be quiet.
It's okay. I think we're all having that rant right now. And think about the virtual environment that we are in, and we're going to see that our child is quickly succeeding or failing in this virtual environment.
Yep.
What has worked really well so
Yep.
far, and what didn't work at all?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? What worked really well and what has not worked at all in the line of virtual teaching?
Yes.
I haven't done any for my elementary school students, and I'm gonna tell you why. Transparently, I had like a huge breakdown when we got kicked out of schools for the rest of the school year. So I was like non-functional.
He did.
Like seriously, like I didn't do any schoolwork. I couldn't reach out to parents because I was really trying to wrap my mind around the fact that I have to sit in my house like all day, every day. Like my passion was stripped from me. And then once I did like get out of that dark place, I realized a great deal of my students did not have laptops at home. Like they didn't have internet access. So it was like, I can't reach out to my kids. And this is like, back in March and April, nobody was being around anybody. So it wasn't even the fact that I could go check on people. But I haven't had any like success with virtual teaching. I'm looking forward to experiencing some success for the 2021 school year. There was one student that I met with, but it wasn't even like on some education type stuff. It was like, oh my gosh, I miss you. How are you doing? Is everything going well? I know you have a birthday coming up, and we would have did something. And like I've had a really close relationship with that family by default. So it was still kind of strange to have like that. Me, like I'm talking to a child on the computer because of a virus that we can't interact with each other. So in the back of my mind, that still was taken away from like, I don't even feel like doing anything because the world is doomed. Like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So I'm slowly getting out of that, but I'm looking forward to ways just of collaborating with some of my counterparts who work in other districts to see what worked for you and what did not work. I think this is going to be an amazing time to do collaboration. And I really want to see, like, this is my idea. I want to see a place where it doesn't matter where you live, you're just in school, and it doesn't matter who teaches you. Like, you're gonna learn. So I want that to be the thing. Like, but I know it's kind of unrealistic because we have different districts, different pots of money, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm gonna ask some people, well, what worked for you? Because I need to know how to do this because I do not know.
I have had some success with virtual teaching when everything happened. I held sessions. Well, I was also like Mr. Bates. I took like a week off just to process everything that was going on, because I was not only worried about my students, I was also worried about my Peter Paul students and their families and what they were going to need to go through what we all went through. So on the RPS side, I held Zoom meetings. I text all the parents. All the working numbers that I had. And I only was able to not reach 2. Their phone numbers had literally changed within those few days. So I held Zoom meet. I texted all the parents and I asked them to give me their best times. If their child could come on at 11 or come at 6. And so I offered myself 2 days a week, Mondays and Wednesdays from 11 to 12, and then from 6 to 7 to satisfy everybody, just basically from listening to what their schedules were and what would help benefit. Now, in those settings, I have 16 students, and so I had to base it off of the 14 because the other 2 I never got in contact with. The highest attendance that I had was 9 students, only 9. So it had me thinking, okay, well, I have 7 other kids that are either just not on or just not doing anything. But on a Peter Paul standpoint, it was important for us to maintain the conversation and the relationships that we had built. So our Peter Paul team held meetings every other Monday at 3 o'clock. And it was just a safe place for students and families to come. We did have some structured events. We always had like a joke of the day. We always threw a problem out there. We would do like fluency drills with the 2nd and 3rd graders, and then multiplication drills with the 4th and 5th graders. If there was anything that we needed to that I needed to relay as a site coordinator to the parents, that was a great time because the parents were literally right there in the house. So I could say, hey, go get mom real fast. Miss Bailey needs to ask her a question. So I have been successful. I'm hoping that this time around, because I gave myself that space to kind of go ahead and just start, I did do it through Zoom, and I found that to be very effective. Google, some of my students, that they had to only use Zoom because they didn't have the Google Classroom on their parent's cell phone. So I would say that I'm looking forward to learning more with being creative, and I'm just hoping that our babies just don't get frustrated, in the mix.
Thank you. And so, how we're talking about this increased communication. We're talking about challenges that families are having. How can parents and educators come together to use all of their collective power to transform how the schools and public education system in Richmond looks, create systems change? How can we get together to do that? And if parents have ideas, please raise your hand and we'll call on you for your ideas, but the panelists can begin sharing their ideas.
Make noise.
Make noise.
I'm not sure if people have been seeing what's going on. And making noise gets things to happen. So to be more specific, email your school board representative, call your school board representatives, come together, have little meetings. Like if you and your homegirl feel the same way about it, it's like your children. I tell my parents in my IEP meetings, at the end of the day, this is your child, and we work for you and your child. So if there's anything in this IEP that you don't agree with, say something about it, and your voice does matter. So understand that regardless of job status, race, sexual orientation, education status, you have thoughts and feelings, and those feelings matter. So please know that if you don't feel comfortable saying something for whatever reason, find and connect with somebody who can speak on your behalf. But it's all about making noise. These people work for us. Like the school board is voted into those positions and they work for you. I know the school board rep for the 7th district is Cheryl Burke. And Cheryl Burke, from my understanding, always has an open ear and will listen to anything that you have to say about what you feel is working and not working in Richmond Public Schools. And then connect with resources like Peter Paul. Peter Paul is an abundance, has an abundance, as well as is an abundance of resource and opportunities for people. It's really interesting how well Peter Paul is represented, but how underutilized it is by, like, we've had to beg parents to put their kids in Peter Paul at George Mason. And it's an after school program that does homework, that does field trips. So I think, and it's not to slight the parents, I think we don't do it because we don't know. So just like listening to what's going on and making noise, like making noise. If you talking on Facebook, tag Richmond Public Schools, someone is going to respond to it. But don't tear them down. Like, tearing down is not going to help. Advocating just by making your concerns known, as well as making your needs known, and know that the people that you're advocating to and that you're speaking to are human just like you. Everybody has their own individual story instead of life experiences. So nobody's better than anybody in my book. And if you want to reach out to me, please do, because I'm very well known for saying what needs to be said, just respectfully.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo a lot of what Mr. Bates shared. I think making noise is extremely important. And I want to acknowledge that in this moment, it may be a time when a lot of us are not feeling particularly strong. We may not be feeling particularly in the know about what's happening in terms of schools opening and all the processes. But, you know, I'm a firm believer in collective strength and power in numbers. And ultimately, I believe that public schools should serve their communities. Public schools should be the center of communities. And if I were to envision an ideal situation where parents and teachers and community members were coming together, it would look a lot like democratic governance of schools. Like, those people would run what happens in the school buildings. Those people would be coming up with solutions. Principals and administrators would be directly responsive to community members. I mean, that type of interaction and engagement would just be smooth. And so I think the only way to do that is to make a lot of noise, is to make your concerns known, is to advocate for your children and for your community members. And I think that ultimately that is how we begin to transform the system of education, but broadly and within Richmond.
Ms. Williams has a comment.
Good afternoon, guys. So my name is Lakeisha Williams. And you know, I am a Peter Paul teacher along with a RPS teacher. I've been doing pre-K for some time now, and this will be my first time to be able to be a pre-K teacher virtually. So I am struggling with that situation. Also, I'm going to piggyback off of Derek and Brianna. I am the type of person that is going to advocate for what needs to be a change for and what we need to do. Like he said, you know, reach out to your school board members, your city council members. I am very strongly, and I stand very much of steel against it. Because I feel like that a lot of our parents go unheard, and they feel like they're not heard, so they don't speak up. They become silenced. They feel like, oh, they forgot about us, so we're not going to speak up. Also, I feel like that we should stop entitling resources to parents. And what I mean by that is, don't just provide it to parents who are in public housing, because I found that a lot of parents are offended by that. Because they said that just because I've had to resort to a certain type of housing, that don't mean that I am lacking the need of resources to my children. Some parents that's in public housing, it may be because of credit situation or anything of that, and they just had to resort to that type of living. That doesn't mean that they go without, they can't feed their kids, they can't be supportive. So we also need to think about that. But I've also, as you know, just newly becoming Broad Rock's PTA president, I found out that a lot of parents, you know, just don't know how to get involved. The delivery of communication is totally, you know, messed up all the way across the board. It's only reaching to certain families in certain ways. So when I reached out and I introduced myself as the president of Broad Rock PTA, A lot of parents came to me and they said, well, they always give it to the parents who are in their apartments, and some of them don't even want it. But some of us who live in houses or have inherited houses, who can rent houses, we don't be offered those same resources, and we're put up for the same struggle. So, just moving forward as a community, as advocates, as teachers, as parents, I just want us to speak up. Like he said, be loud, be heard, tell them how you feel. Please be respectfully, because, if, like you said, if you down them, they're not trying to hear that. They're going to push you to the side as if you never even said nothing. You're going to go unheard. So just advocate, reach out to our city officials. November the 3rd is coming, people. Please don't fill out those papers. Go vote. Go vote in person, please. I'm not having faith that
the papers you're talking about are the bogus papers that have been coming in everyone's mail that are
so
not
bogus.
from your elections office.
They're so bogus. I can't even trust the mail service to deliver regular mail. So how am I going to trust them to reroute something? I've been waiting on a package that's supposed to have been here in 2 days since February the 4th, and we're months down the line. So no, I'm not trusting them. Vote so we can make a change in our communities. And then we need to force those people to come to the table to hear us. Because like you said, those are our children. We're out there, we're for them, and we need to step up.
I appreciate everything she just said. The main thing, what I heard her say was, we need to give services and offer not even assistance, but empower where there is a need. It's a slap in the face, like she said, to some people who may live in Mosby. That's why I don't agree with the idea of just, everybody in Mosby needs help. Not at all. Not at all. There may be a family who does not live in Mosby that needs help. So that goes back to us knowing the needs or finding out the needs of our children and families, and then meeting those needs. The data is so important. And I know Richmond Public Schools, the Office of Engagement, is about to create hubs for individual neighborhoods, and they will have individuals that's out there that call family liaisons, beating the streets and figuring out, well, what are the needs, wants, and likes of the community, and moving forward from that. Because we have to get away from the assumptions. The assumptions are part of the reason why we're living in the society that we live in today. If we're gonna call a spade, like, if we're gonna call it what it is, it's a problem. So we definitely have to get away from that. Thank you so much, Ms. Williams, for making that, like, making noise about that. And that's huge. It's huge. It's huge.
I have another noisemaker that has a comment. Miss Miles, would you go ahead?
Thank you to the panelists here. You guys are great. Thank you, Chanel. I can everything you guys have already said. Also, I just want to let you guys know that we want to support you all as educators as well. Sometimes as a parent, our hands are tied, and sometimes as an educator, your hands are tied. But together, we have to show that the teachers and the parents and families and the community can come together on one cord to support each other. So you guys, let us know as parents how we can support you guys. Because you have been doing a good job of supporting our children and our families. We love you. We miss you. Ms. Bailey, you are that experience, and everybody knows about you. And I just want you guys to, when the days get tough and rough, and you sit there and you Zoom out or Google Hangout, you think about those families who appreciate what you do, who love you guys, and we support you guys. We must figure this out for the best of our babies. Thank you so much. Brianna, you're rocking. People who love to, take what we say out of the community and not be afraid of some of the backlash. Just want you guys to support you guys are doing. Just let us know more, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I love and miss y'all too. That's the parents of one of my students, and she and I work so closely together. And that's, like, I'm so glad that she's on the call, because she works with Peter Paul, but she also worked very closely with myself, and understanding that we're working together for her child to be successful. And we just have meetings of the minds at all times. And she often pulled me to the side and said, you know what, just thank you for making this a better experience for my child. Like, he was in a different school. It wasn't the same. I appreciate the time that you're taking and the commitment that you have. And that was not just reflected by herself, but also by her son's father. And that made it even like more impactful for me, because I'm really huge on just families understanding. Like, look, oh my gosh, he's grown so much since March. Hey, buddy. It's all about just making it easier for a child, because we're here, the babies are why we do the work that we do. So just keeping that in the back of our minds at all times, or more so the front of our minds. Look how big he's gotten. Oh my gosh, he's almost as tall as you. He was not that tall in March.
We're in the last minute of our community conversation. If there is anything you would like to share that hasn't been discussed so far, that's really weighing on your heart, that you would like to share with everyone right now, please feel free to do so.
I would like to see this conversation happen again after we've actually started the school year, and then that way we can build some data and then decide what can Peter Paul do, what can the other outside agencies do, what's working, what's not working. So I challenge family engagement to have this conversation again.
Okay.
Because it's going to look a whole lot different.
Yeah.
It's going to sound a whole lot different.
Definitely. I want to see collaboration more so with Peter Paul and the Office of Engagement at Richmond Public Schools. I think that's going to be an amazing connection, especially with the community hubs that they're creating, and just getting really to the needs, wants, and desires of the community. And I also say that because Peter Paul is a more trusted face than RPS, and that's no slight to RPS, but like the numbers, the conversations, and the participation have shown that RPS is not an organization that's entirely trusted by the community, and that's not no fault of the current administration. It's just years of RPS. That's just the stigma that's attached to it. So I want to get us to a place of that stigma being erased, and the only way we can erase that stigma is by showing, improving, and building those deeper connections. So that's going to be my focus more so than ever, just creating deep connections with children and families to make a stronger community.
I'd just like to lift up how incredibly thoughtful Peter Paul has been with this series of conversations. I think that this is one small example of how creative you all can be. And so I really think that we're going to start looking to leaders within Peter Paul, looking to organizations and agencies within Richmond that are creative outside of what RPS sometimes puts limits around. So we're going to start really, I think, having to push a lot of buttons to get some things done that are actually going to serve our students and communities. So I just want to thank you all for the work that you're doing, and I look forward to great things coming out of Peter Paul.
Thank you. I want to thank my panel, Mr. Bates, Dr. Noni, Ms. Bailey. I want to thank the partners and family members who are currently on this call right now for taking the time out of your day to join us. I really appreciate everyone's comments. I appreciate everyone's thoughts in this process. And I look forward to hearing more of this conversation, because as weird as it is also part of my role at Peter Paul to listen to more of these conversations. So it was appropriate for me to facilitate this call. But I'm really excited about everything that you guys shared today, your honesty, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that we discussed today, and even the tips on how we can become more involved as family members and community members. So with that, I appreciate your time. I hope everybody's hearts and minds are clear, and y'all are churning and thinking about how we can make our youth successful in this upcoming school year, and thinking about the next time we have this conversation. With that, have a great weekend and the rest of the day.
Thank you for thinking of all of us, and y'all have an awesome weekend, and stay safe. And until we meet again.
Bye.